there's no fund developer out there that could do their job if they did not believe in the mission of their organization. There's none of us want to say that it's a sales job, but at the end of the day, we're selling hope. We're selling, these incredible things to people that they can invest in and they can make real change. And you can't do that if you don't believe in what you do, But I do think that having such a personal tie and a personal connection to what we do, it does give me a very unique perspective and also a very unique experience to have these conversations with donors. So not only are we able to share these stories of the people that we've supported and the people that we've really helped navigate this world, I can also talk about my own experiences and how even just working for such an inclusive and equitable organization has really supported me to be where I am and how I've found success. And so I do count myself very, very lucky that I get to be in such a fantastic position with this organization. So,
welcome to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. In this episode, we speak with Santana Febrey, one of 4 individuals honored with the Outstanding Young Professional Award by the Association for Fundraising Professionals in 2024. Santana serves as Development Officer at Autism Edmonton, where she has spearheaded the organization's first fund development strategic plan and been instrumental in building partnerships, leading to corporate donations nearly 300% over projections. We caught up with Santana at AFP ICON, the Fundraising Association's international conference held this year in Toronto.
I want to make sure I ask you about the organization first, because people may not know about Autism Edmonton. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I would love to. So Autism Edmonton is an organization in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. We've been around for 53 years this year, which is pretty impressive. And we support neurodivergent folks, so autistic individuals, just kind of all sorts of spectrum of neurodiversities. And it doesn't matter if you have an official diagnosis, whether you're in the process of getting a diagnosis or whether you have self-diagnosed. So in Alberta particularly, and I'm sure it's pretty similar across Canada, wait times for diagnoses are lengthy. So for adults, it can be anywhere up to 10 years, and for children, it's anywhere between 2 to 5. And so our organization, we really try to just make sure that our programs are accessible and available to everybody regardless of that official diagnosis, because you could be waiting for forever before you're actually able to participate in anything or getting any services or resources. So as well with that, we support individuals across their lifespan. So we find often many organizations are geared towards children, which obviously incredible, important work, but there just seems to be such a lack of resources for adults. And it seems as if, people, governments, other organizations and services, it's as if 18, you become an adult and autism is gone, and that's not the case. It is a lifelong diagnosis, and services don't stop at 18. And so it's really important for us as an organization to make sure that we're providing services to people across their lifespan and an array of different services as well.
Can you talk about neurodiversity a little bit?
Yeah.
Because that term is one we all hear, but there is a broad spectrum, as you said.
Absolutely, yeah. So I myself am neurodivergent, so I am ADHD. I was late diagnosed. I was diagnosed at the age of 25. It was a pretty hard-hitting experience because I went my entire life not having a clue, and my brother was actually diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age. And so that is a very common thing that we see as well, that women are typically, women and girls are very typically underserved in that area, and so often will go without.
I wonder why that is.
I think, well, not necessarily, I guess, that I think I know. Just the misconceptions and the education and what we know, right?
How it presents itself, and then a
so
different belief about
I know when I got my diagnosis, my mom felt a lot of guilt around it, and we had to have such real conversations about it because it wasn't her fault. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my dad's fault. It was nobody's fault because at that time, there's no way that they could have presented me in front of a psychiatrist and I would have received a diagnosis because they would not have seen anything different about me. And they would have looked at my brother, who was a very, hyperactive little boy, that it was very obvious that he was ADHD. So when we talk about neurodiversities and the spectrum of neurodiversities, it's so broad, especially the autism spectrum. So, you will get so many different languages and so many different preferences that people have when they talk about it. But for us, it's really important that, we are using identity-first language. So we would talk about autistic people, autistic individuals. We would not say a person with autism or, a person experiencing autism, and really just allowing people to kind of take that identity on for themselves. So with that, sorry, now I lost my thought process.
No, that's very helpful. I love the way people discuss language, because then we have a basis of talking about a subject with as little confusion as possible, but also it opens the gate to understanding and exploring things that we wouldn't normally have a language to explore.
Totally, yeah.
And when you're talking about this, I wondered if that use of language, of saying a person with autism, doesn't work versus an autistic person, if that's a relatively new paradigm for discussing this. So giving people agency over their identity.
Totally, yes. This was something that we really saw come out of COVID, and we saw it happening in so many different movements, where people were really taking back ownership over their identities, over who they are, what makes them unique. And it's so powerful, honestly. It just has been such an incredible time. I think to be a human being, we're just watching all of these different communities band together with themselves and really creating what they want and telling us this is how we want to be spoken about, this is how we want to be spoken to, and then giving organizations like ours the opportunity to say, absolutely, we stand behind you, we are here for you, we would not exist without you, so we want to make sure that we are doing our best at representing you. And so I think language is so important, and it's always changing. This is where we are today. It's not necessarily where we're going to be tomorrow, right? And so it's all about being flexible and adapting, and really when you're serving communities and people, it's about listening to what they want. It's like that saying that, nothing about us without us, right? It's so important to listen to the people that you're actually serving. Our organization would not exist if it wasn't for the incredible people that we get to support and serve, and who come to us for a variety of different things, and to make sure that we're representing them the way that they want to be is so important. And I think that just taking that out into the world, when we talk about even pronouns and everything like that, right? It's also about asking, because we'll have people that come into our organization where they don't prefer identity first language. They would prefer, person first. So they would prefer person with autism, and that is totally 100% fine. We are always making sure that we're talking to people the way that they want to be communicated with, and we're in a unique space where communication anyways is so important, and so it's always about how do you want to be communicated with, what is your best method of communication, and so it really opens up that conversation to have those chats and to make sure that we're doing the best that we can. But I think it's really important to make sure that you're always going out of your way to make sure that you're serving people the right way, but also making them comfortable.
Yeah, and as you said, you're dealing with a wide spectrum of neurodiversity, but you're also dealing with a wide spectrum of people, different ages, different experiences, different identities, and as a result, they're going to use maybe different language to think about, as well as explain, if they choose to, who they are, where they are in the world, and then hopefully the rest of us will adapt to their language.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's it's fascinating. I wonder if maybe part of this thing that shocked me in what you said is this long timeline before some kind of diagnosis. And is that largely because of the way medicine operates, or is it a lack of kind of public awareness, even within our families, where we don't recognize what may be happening within us or within our families, and so we wait? There's a hesitation even before we go and talk to professionals who might recognize ways that they can help us to understand who we are.
Totally. So I think it's so layered. There's so many different things that are impacting this. I think one of the main things is that for the longest time, the way that we were diagnosing autism, it was very much geared towards individuals who had higher support needs. And so a lot of people...
Like nonverbal is one kind of...
100%. And so anybody who kind of fell outside of that was not receiving a diagnosis, was maybe not even considered for a diagnosis, has kind of gone their lives wondering why maybe, they didn't process things the same way as their peers, or they were having, difficulties at work, connecting with coworkers, or whatever that could look like for them. And what we hear oftentimes is, people just felt a little off. They just always felt a little weird, a little different, and they could never really pinpoint what that was and what that meant for them. And that was really largely due to the fact that we just didn't know. There was just not a lot of education out there. There is still ongoing research, and that's something that will never end either, right? But really, for the longest time, they were not diagnosing the entire spectrum. And so they were really focusing on individuals that had higher support needs. And so we had an influx of all of these adults who are now, in their early 30s to even mid 70s that are receiving these diagnoses, just as like a confirmation on their for themselves that, okay, this makes sense now I know. Like, I know for myself, when I received that diagnosis of ADHD, it was kind of like, holy cow, how did I live like my whole life without realizing this? And B, how did I do it? How did I do it with like no supports, no resources, no knowledge of why I, behaved the way that I did, or reacted to things a certain way, or, why I always felt like I wasn't participating at my best or performing at my best and in certain areas of my life, and why it seemed like it was so easy for my peers to do those things. And so it's really just confirmation for ourselves that, okay, this makes sense. And now that I know, this opens up a whole other book of resources and things that I can access, and it will teach me, maybe different coping mechanisms, or now I can start learning how to hone different skills, or, what that means, and just having that basic understanding. And I also think it brings you into this community of people that, all of our experiences are so unique to ourselves and they're so different, but it gives you access to this community that is just so beautiful and so welcoming and so encouraging, and just to have other people that know what it's like to go through those struggles is so incredible. And I just can't even explain to you like what that feeling of being in a room with people that think the same way as you, like, you just know that your brains are processing the same way. Like, you just feel like, oh wow, like this is a moment where I can truly be myself, and not be judged for it, or not have people wonder like, what's up, why are you acting like that, or whatever it is that you may be doing. And yeah, it's a very, very cool experience. So that's kind of one area. Sorry, that was a very long answer for that. And then as well, because of all of those people that we had that kind of missed that maybe initial, diagnosis run that they would have received as a child, there is now just so many of them that are trying to go through this process. And so in Alberta, particularly, we have a hospital in Edmonton that actually does have a diagnosis clinic for adults. And then if you go that way, it is covered by our Alberta Healthcare. But again, the wait list is so long. So if you wanted to go a private way, just so that you could go through the process a little quicker, you could get that diagnosis obviously now within probably 6 months wait time. You're looking at paying anywhere between $2,500 to $5,000 depending on which psychiatrist you see. And so that's where we see a lot of people who will kind of go through like this self-diagnosis process and just self-diagnose because it's just so inaccessible to receive the actual diagnosis. And
I don't know if treatment is the correct word, but also kind of this effort to address what we see as our own self-diagnosis. There's like this big rise of apps, for example, that are related to ADD, ADHD, and that's fine. I think it's great that there is an effort to find new ways for everybody to fit in the world. but with self-diagnosis and then reliance on commercial apps that aren't necessarily scientifically grounded, it must make this additionally complicated if you have a long wait time, especially for kids. I mean, so the school systems also are not providing a quick diagnosis either.
And it's quite dangerous as well. And I appreciate you saying, not sure if it's the right terminology, because if you just don't know, right? But we would never say treatment, because it's not curable, and I think treatment kind of has this undertone that
almost like it's disease, which it's
right,
not.
It's
just
and so
difference.
that you can, you could be cured. And we see constantly these organizations or people that pop up claiming that they have this magical cure for autism that it's going to cure your neurodiversity away, and you're going to become, I don't even know, I guess, what their perfect vision of somebody who's in society is, and it's so dangerous on so many levels, because I would never want to cure myself of my ADHD. I think it is like wholeheartedly what makes me very unique and makes me like is a huge part of who I am, and all my quirks and everything that comes with it. I wouldn't trade it in for the world. And so I think that also it's so damaging, because it really makes people question their identity, but it also makes them question their self-worth, and that that they have something that needs to be cured when that isn't the case at all, right? It's all about teaching people coping skills and how we can just navigate this life and use things and these different skills that we have to our advantage, right? Because there's tons of things that and tons of, like, even if we think about jobs or activities that are so geared towards people who are neurodivergent that maybe would not be the way for somebody who is neurotypical. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I have to ask now what your original question was, because I do not remember.
Well, I think I'm probably revealing myself in this conversation. I didn't know we were going to go here, and I really appreciate what you're sharing. Not only for the conversation we're having for the audience, but personally. We're in a place now where discussing topics like this are kind of fraught, and they don't need to be. It seems like a big part of this is about making sure that there's a level of public awareness, so that there's less judgment and more, and never tolerance, but complete acceptance of every person for who they are.
Totally, yeah.
And I mean, the opposite is like it almost sounded like the Divergent movies when you were talking about something. It's like, okay, we can just give people a shot and they're going to be fixed, or X-Men, and we're going to take away your special abilities. All of that sounds pretty terrifying to me. So it's really wonderful to hear that there's a system, albeit with delays, that lets people kind of be their best selves.
And I think that's what we need more of, in this world. Empathy just goes such a long way, and I think we're all this world is busy. We're all doing stuff. We're all, trying to get from point A to point B. And I think just taking a step back, taking time to consider that every single person's, experience on this earth is unique and different than ours, and people are allowed to have bad days. Like I remember a call that I had with a mom very early on in my career. I wasn't always in fundraising. I started out kind of on the program side, and I had a call with a mom, and she was so upset because her son, who was 9 years old, was out at recess playing with his friends, and they were play fighting, and one of the boys kind of fell and hit his nose off of one of the playground equipments and ended up with a bloody nose. And her son ended up in the principal's office and called to mom, your son is aggressive, you need to come and pick him up, this is like unexplainable behavior, like this is inappropriate, like this should not be happening, yada yada yada. And so she's on the phone and she's like I can't even believe this, like I don't know what to do, like they're telling me that he's mean and he's aggressive and all of these things, and I can't believe this about my son, and I'm just so sad and I'm just so upset and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to I don't know how to take this part of him away and to make him, so that he is acting like the rest of his peers. And I had to sit there and think for a moment, because I don't know if you can think about any typical 9-year-old, boy that you've ever met, but like that's not different behavior. They're all playing on the playground, acting wild, because that's what 9-year-old children do. And so I think a lot of the times when we're thinking about people and we're seeing these situations, we're always putting that piece of them at the forefront. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, we're all still people. And that was still a child, and that was still a 9-year-old boy who was playing with his friends on the playground. And like, that situation was not unique because of his autism. That situation was unique because they're 9-year-old kids that are just, having a heyday. And an unfortunate thing happened where one of them ended up getting hurt. But that situation could have played over millions of times in several different circumstances. And it wouldn't have been like, oh, well, there was an autistic boy there, and so clearly, he was the instigator in this scenario. And I think, again, we're talking about that awareness, and we're talking about that acceptance, and awareness is so important, and educating people is so important, and that is a big part of what we do at our office as well, is really that education piece. But speaking to just even Autism Acceptance Day, which we just celebrated back on April 2nd, so it is April 2nd is World Autism. Technically it is World Autism Awareness Day, but the autistic community has really pushed to be World Acceptance Day, because they have felt that, like, we've been here, we've educated, we're talking about it, like, we need to move past this awareness piece and get to the acceptance piece. And I think so much of that really just boils down to the empathy and to, caring about one another. And I know that sometimes it's just so hard, and we're not all having the best days, but even when we're not having good days, we need to remember that other people are also allowed to not have good days, right? And so extending that grace, I think, just goes such a long way.
I want to thank you so much, first of all, for your openness about this. It's just wonderful to be able to talk about things that are important in that way, and to speak from personal experience. I'm curious, you talked about diagnosis at 25. I don't know what age you were when you came to the organization. I know you began in programs, so were you already kind of really steeped in this issue, both personally and professionally, and then joined the organization, or did you gain your awareness of all of this as you were working in the field? And then how did that translate, I know this is a long question, but how did that translate into your work in fundraising? Because not a lot of people go from both personal and program to fundraising, but that gives you kind of special abilities in talking to people.
So it's actually super interesting. So I often think about growing up with my brother, who, as I've mentioned, is also ADHD, and I look at his experiences that he went through and how vastly different they were than mine. He was extremely labeled by his diagnosis. At that time, again, there was a lot of misunderstandings. There's still a lot of misunderstandings, and he did not receive the proper supports. He's probably one of the smartest people that I know. He is so brilliant, and so a very common thing that would always happen with him was he would be in class, and he was so good at math that he would always finish his worksheets before everybody else, and then he wants to go and talk and visit because he's done and he's bored, and he was constantly getting in trouble. And so for me, I'm like, easy solution, give him another worksheet, keep him busy. If you don't want him to get up from his desk, how can we navigate? There's an easy solution there, it's not to send him to the principal's office because he's being disruptive and causing a scene and embarrassing him. It's, advance him, give him something to do, maybe there's something in the classroom, and this goes for so many children. But so going into the organization, I had a very general, I would say, decent knowledge of just neurodiversities in general, but I really didn't know, I wouldn't say that I was 100% confident. I had never really suspected myself. It wasn't until COVID happened that we were sent, to work from home, and in all honesty, and I have to preface this with, I love my job. I love working. I love going to work every day. I love seeing my coworkers. That is such a huge thing for me. And COVID happened, and I did not work. I just could not get myself to work at home. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I couldn't figure out a schedule. I couldn't do it. And I remember we had a different executive director at the time who called me and said, your image is slipping, and I don't know what's going on here, but you're so well respected, and that is fading. And I was like, oh my goodness, okay, well that's not good. And then I had another manager from our office who called and said, I just had a conversation, with our executive director. It was mentioned what was said to you, and I want you to know that like that is not how we feel, but we have noticed, that like tasks, things are not being done, and she said, I just wonder if maybe if you're depressed, like maybe you need to go to your doctor, maybe you need to have a conversation. And so I was like, okay, yeah, maybe. I honestly, I don't know. Like I'm also in the dark on this. I can't figure it out. And so I went to my doctor, and he was like, I really don't think that that's the case, but let's try it, whatever. Let's try this medication for 3 months. We'll see what happens. And so he gave me a prescription for an antidepressant. I took it for 3 months, and it's not even that like I felt like numb or anything like that. Like I did not feel a single effect from this medication. It just did nothing. So I went back and we had that conversation, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I don't think that this is what it is. He's like, I'm pretty sure that you have ADHD, and it's going now unmanaged in these circumstances because the pressures of going to work, the pressures of being part of a team, the pressures of working, collaboratively and working together, and that's not here anymore. That's missing. And so he's like, so you're in a situation where you just don't really know how to navigate that. And so that led me to getting the diagnosis, to really understanding where I was. Fortunately, we were able to get back into the office, shortly thereafter. And there was a couple of stints where we did have to go back to working from home. But I was very fortunate at that time that, we did have a transition in our management. And our current executive director, I truly cannot say enough good things about her. She is one of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. But she was so supportive, and she really worked with me to figure out like something that was going to work the best for me. And I was able to do so successfully, which is so great. And again, it just kind of goes to show like that empathy piece and working with your people and trying to find that solution. And so that kind of is what really sparked my whole diagnosis journey. And then starting with the organization, I did do my practicum. So I'm more education background is in social services. And so I had done my practicum with them, and then at the time we had again a different executive director. Our organization has gone through a couple of staff changeovers in the time that I have been there, but her and I got along really, really well. She actually really kind of kickstarted my career, and she wanted me to stay, so she made up kind of a weird non-existent position just to kind of get me in the door, knowing that somebody would be retiring within 6 months, and then maybe I could kind of shoe into that position. And so I did that. I ended up taking over the position of the individual who was in charge of our HR operations thing. Again, totally not something that I had education or experience in, but I was like, you know what, whatever, like let's do it. And that position itself wasn't really a full-time job for me. I like to multitask. I like to be doing a million things at once. And so I had started kind of doing fund development off the side of my desk. At the time, we had a marketing and communications gal who she was doing it off of the side of her desk. And so I know I had mentioned our organization is 53 years old. At this point, it had still never had an actual fund development staff doing fund development duties. And so to think that, it's existed for this long, we don't have government contracts, we rely heavily on donors to support our programs. It's pretty impressive that nobody was actually concentrating their efforts in that area. And so I kind of started helping and supporting her in that and taking on additional duties. And then when Melinda, our current executive director, started with us, she had talked to me many times and was really trying to push me into kind of like just doing it. And she's like, you're already doing it. You're doing it well. She's like, I feel like if you just took it and owned it, we could really hone these skills and we could turn you into like an incredible fundraiser. And I was just so anxious because I felt that, as an organization that relied so heavily on fund development, I didn't want to be the reason that it failed, because I loved this organization so dearly, and it's so important to me, and it's so important to so many other people that I did not want to take that leap of faith to push it into that next iteration of itself. And fortunately, we in the process of hiring a fund developer. We did hire somebody that just, it wasn't a good match, wasn't a good fit. Melinda was really looking for somebody that had that experience, that could come in and maybe kind of support and coach and, you know, all of those kinds of things. And it just didn't work out. And we actually ended up with my coworker, Justin, who is our development coordinator, and is, you know, he was fresh. He wasn't even graduated university yet, you know, like he applied, I believe it was like April, and he was writing his final exams in May and had started with our organization in June. And we've been working together now almost 2 years. And I mean, this organization has made many good decisions, but I tell you, like, they made such a good decision when they chose to hire him, and he's incredible, and he is also part of the reason why I have been so successful and building up what our fund development team and our programs are. And I know one of the questions you had asked was just that unique perspective of being on the program side and then into this kind of fund development world, and then also having that personal tie to the organization. And you know, there's no fund developer out there that could do their job if they did not believe in the mission of their organization. You know, none of us want to say that it's a sales job, but at the end of the day, we're selling hope. We're selling, you know, these incredible things to people that they can invest in and they can make real change. And you can't do that if you don't believe in what you do, you know. But I do think that having such a personal tie and a personal connection to what we do, it does give me a very unique perspective and also a very unique experience to have these conversations with donors. So not only are, you know, we able to share these stories of the people that we've supported and the people that we've really helped navigate this world, I can also talk about my own experiences and how even just working for such an inclusive and equitable organization has really, you know, supported me to be where I am and how I've found success. And so I do count myself very, very lucky that I get to be in such a fantastic position with this organization. So it's a long way, again, to answer that question. But
it's a great answer, and it also seems to open the door to maybe providing a bit of advice. There are a lot of organizations that hopefully they haven't gone 50 years without somebody in fund development.
Yes.
But if they can do that successfully, great. But for organizations that are thinking about hiring people and supporting the people that they hire, both of which were big pieces of your story, I'm wondering if you have some advice, especially for people who are, I hope, opening doors to a new rising generation. Pick your age group in that,
yeah.
But the new kind of rising generation of people in development who are going to come to it with skills, personal experience, etc. But I hope also the kinds of the leaning into the empathy that seems to be so important to your work.
And I think, you know, it goes to say, like, I don't know what it is like across the board. I can only obviously talk from personal experiences that we've had within our organization. But hiring, it is so hard. It is so difficult. And I mean, we're such a small organization. Like, we have this very small team of 13 people, and we have created just this very safe, inclusive space where it's just such a joy to get to work with these people that when I go into work every day, like, I know we share the same values. Like, I know we believe in the same things. I know that we're out here supporting the same things. And I know that is such an unrealistic expectation that you're ever going to find a job where that is the case, because obviously when you have large organizations, you're going to get such a mixed bag. But I think, you know, being able to take chances on people, especially young people, I don't know. I don't think that young people get enough credit. And it's so funny because I don't even know, like, I know that I received the young, you know, Outstanding Young Professional Award, but sometimes I don't necessarily lump myself in as young anymore, because I feel that, like, you know, we've got this new generation of people that are coming up that have had completely different experiences in you know, education and life than I have. And so I see these people that are just coming up, and they're so inspiring, and they're so talented, and they just have such incredible ideas. And I know a lot of times, you know, that these ideas, they're so large and they may seem kind of scary, and so we don't really want to kind of get into that because we don't really know what that means, and change is scary. But I think that when we embrace that and we take the chance on people to come in and, you know, show us what they got and to kind of teach them and help them and support them. But there's just nothing better than that, you know? Like, we talk about all of these jobs where, you know, there's so many individuals that have gone and they've got degrees and they've got master's degrees and PhDs, and they're getting entry-level jobs. And granted, I 100% understand that you have to have a little bit of experience. You have to have, an idea of what it's like to be in the working world. But the idea that we put this expectation that we can just pay people less based on the fact that, they're just coming out of university, or that you have to have X amount of experience to do, whatever type of job, without saying, like, we have this opportunity to take this person who has just come out of, like, some of the most transformational years that they will probably go through, and mold them and shape them and build them into this incredible person. And you would hope that, dependent on the size of your organization and what those levels of moving up are like, that you can have that person take on these different roles within your organization, and then you get like this person that is just such a huge advocate because they feel so invested. People are so invested in people that invest in them, and I think we see so much turnover in this sector because the lack of resources, for one. Obviously, I know that not every organization can afford to come to a conference like this. I know for sure that my organization, it was a huge stretch to be able to send us to this, and you have that guilt that weighs on you that this is how maybe you're spending donor money and all of these things. But continuing education, supporting your people to grow, that is the single most important thing I think that employers can do to support their staff, because if our world is changing so fast and so rapid that if your staff are failing because of, maybe new technology or new language that they haven't been briefed on, or whatever that looks like, that is not a failure on them. Like, that is a failure on you as a leader. And that is a hard pill to swallow for some. And I know that, budgets and all of these restrictions come into play. But I feel there's so many creative ways that we can go about this. And I think by welcoming young people into our workforce, by giving them the opportunities to shine, giving them the opportunities to learn and to grow, and to look up to the other people that are in that organization that maybe, can help support them on their journey, is like, we're just creating good people, and good people that you want to hire. And, I don't know, that's how I feel about it. So
that's it for this episode of the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Autism Edmonton, go to autismedmonton.org. Our thanks to our sponsor, DonorSearch, the world leader in fundraising intelligence, and our producer, Jack Frost. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, the DonorSearch YouTube channel, or wherever you'd like to listen, and consider giving us a like and a positive review so others can find us too. Check out our live webinars and webcasts on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and come back next week for our next interview with another leader in the world of social good. Until then, this is Jay Frost. Thanks for joining us.